I was halfway through organizing my fishing lures when I saw her again, Priscilla Decker, the HOA president, arms crossed, lips pursed so tight you'd think she'd swallowed a lemon. She stood at the edge of my backyard like she owned it, barking into her phone and glaring at my brand new fishing shed like it had personally offended her. Now, let me set one thing straight: I'm Deputy Elias Carter, and not just any deputy. I've got full jurisdiction in this county, which includes this HOA-infested neighborhood. I moved here for the peace and quiet. Built my home on the corner lot, no shared fences, no nosy neighbors. At least, that's what I thought before Priscilla started her reign of clipboard tyranny. Illegal structure, it's an eyesore, she'd screeched at the last HOA meeting, waving a stack of blurry photos she'd taken from who knows where. That shed is not on the approved architectural modifications list. It's a fishing shed, Priscilla, I said calmly. It's on my property, it's under the height limit, and I followed every zoning code to the letter. She didn't like that. Not one bit, so today, as I was reorganizing my tackle boxes, I knew something was off. She was pacing now, fast and furious, still on the phone. Her voice carried enough for me to catch the words non-compliant, dangerous, and this one got me armed. You've got to be kidding. I walked over, wiping my hands on my jeans. Afternoon, Priscilla. Everything all right? Her head snapped around like she'd just seen a ghost. You're not allowed to speak to me right now. I've called the authorities. I blinked. I am the authorities, she scoffed. Not today, you're not. I called 911. Don't think I won't press charges. For what? I asked, genuinely curious. For building a hostile structure adjacent to common property and for threatening me the other day. That stopped me cold. Threatening you, you said, and I quote, you'll regret this. I said you'll regret dragging this to court, I corrected, because you'll lose. Which you would. That's when I heard the sirens. 2 cruisers pulled up, lights spinning. I recognized both younger deputies who stepped out. They looked from me to Priscilla, clearly confused. Deputy Carter, one of them asked. Priscilla marched toward them. Arrest him. He's got an unauthorized building and he's intimidating residents. I folded my arms. You serious right now? She spun back around, triumphant. I warned you. The younger deputy walked over to me. You want to handle this? Yep. I took a step forward, badge still clipped to my belt, and faced Priscilla. You just filed a false police report, Priscilla. That's a misdemeanor, and accusing a law enforcement officer of threats without evidence. That's defamation. Her face went pale for a flicker of a second, then she recovered. I have every right as HOA president to report violations. Sure you do, but you don't get to lie to emergency services to get your way. That's abuse of public resources. One of the deputies pulled me aside. You want to press charges? I looked over at her. She was fuming, but something behind her eyes told me this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Not yet, I said. But I want a copy of the call transcript, the incident report, and I want to log this officially. He nodded. Got it. Priscilla turned on her heel and stormed off, but not before yelling over her shoulder. This isn't over. That shed will be gone by next week, I promise you. I watched her march away like she was heading into battle. She had no idea what she just walked into. Because I wasn't just a deputy, I was about to become her worst nightmare. When Monday rolled around, I was sitting in my office at the sheriff's department going through paperwork when an email landed in my inbox that stopped me mid-sip of coffee. It was from the county zoning board. Subject: urgent. Review request from HOA concerning unauthorized structure parcel 14B. Parcel 14B was my property. I opened it. Attached was a formal complaint submitted by the Evergreen Trails HOA, citing potential environmental disruption due to unapproved construction near watershed lines. That was rich. My shed sat a good 30 feet from the nearest drainage gully, well within legal limits. They weren't just grasping at straws now. They were digging up dirt and hoping to find something they could weaponize. I forwarded the email to the county planning office with a note to pull the site survey I'd filed before building. I also CC'd my friend Thomas. a land use attorney who'd helped me with the permit process. If Priscilla wanted a war, I was happy to oblige with file folders, timestamps, and legal precedent. That afternoon, I drove home early and found a new surprise waiting in my driveway, a bright orange notice posted on my garage door. Cease and desist pending HOA investigation. Signed in thick black marker. P. Decker, President. I pulled it down and read the fine print. According to the notice, I was to immediately halt all activity related to the use or maintenance of said structure due to violations of Community Code 7.4c, unauthorized utility installations. Interesting. My shed didn't even have electricity. I walked around the back and noticed something else. A small white flag on a stick planted next to the corner of the shed. Survey tape fluttered from it. Someone had been on my property without permission. A rustle from the side yard made me glance over. There, crouched behind my rose bushes, was Dale Hendricks, the HOA's so-called compliance inspector. He held a clipboard, camera strapped around his neck, and the world's worst attempt at camouflage, a neon green vest. "Dale," I called out. "You trespassing?" He froze, then stood up like a kid caught stealing cookies. "I was doing a preliminary assessment, on my land. We're authorized to perform inspections in cases of suspected violations. Not without notice and not without permission." I pointed at the flag he'd planted. "You move any of my property markers." I repositioned one for visibility. "That's a felony, Dale. Tampering with boundary markers is a criminal offense in this state." His jaw went slack. "I didn't know Priscilla told me to document everything. She also tell you to fabricate violations." "I didn't fabricate anything." I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture of him, flag and all. "You've got two options. Either you remove every flag you placed and get off my property, or we do this with a formal criminal complaint." He didn't argue, just muttered something under his breath and started yanking up the stakes. By the time he disappeared down the sidewalk, I was already on the phone with the county assessor's office. I requested a full property boundary inspection by a licensed surveyor, not some stooge with a clipboard. I wanted everything documented. If they were going to play dirty, I'd bury them in paperwork. The next morning, I stopped by City Hall and filed a request to review the HOA's financial disclosures. As a resident, I had the right to inspect annual budgets and board meeting minutes. I wanted to know where the dues were going and whether Priscilla was funneling funds into her little campaigns of harassment. When the clerk brought me the documents, I noticed something odd. There were repeated payments monthly, not quarterly, to a company called Decker Property Consulting. The address listed was a P.O. box in the next town over. I knew that name. Priscilla's maiden name was Decker before she married and then divorced Mr. Decker, who, according to old court records, ran a home services company that dissolved last year. This wasn't just petty. It was personal profit. I took the stack of records and drove straight to Thomas's office. He whistled as he flipped through them. "If she's approving payments to a company she has a financial interest in, that's self-dealing. And if the board didn't vote on it, or she misrepresented those payments, then we're looking at fraud. Can we move on it? I'll draft a cease and desist letter and a demand for full financial disclosure. If she doesn't comply, we petition for a temporary injunction. I'll also contact the state HOA regulatory board." I leaned back. "I'm not done yet. I want to hold a community meeting, not her staged HOA nonsense, a real one, on neutral ground." Thomas nodded. "We'll need to notify the residents properly. Bypass the HOA's mailing list. I'll handle it." I spent the next 2 days distributing flyers door to door. I kept it simple. Neighborhood meeting, learn your rights, Thursday at 6 p.m. VFW Hall, food provided. I didn't mention Priscilla. I didn't need to. Word spread fast. Thursday came and the VFW was packed. Folding chairs filled every inch of the floor. Retirees, young couples, single parents, they all showed up. Most had stories. A lot of them had questions. I stood at the front with Thomas and laid it all out. The false 911 call, the forged violation notices, the hidden payments. I passed around copies of the financial records. The room got quieter with every page. Then Carol Simmons, who lived 2 streets over, raised her hand. Last year, I was fined $200 for overwatering my lawn. I asked for proof and never got any. The check I mailed was made out to Decker Property Consulting. Thomas's brow furrowed. Did they instruct you to make it out to that name? It was printed on the notice. That was the turning point. People started pulling violation letters from purses and folders. The pattern was clear. Priscilla had been laundering fines through her fake company. Thousands of dollars, maybe more. I took the floor again. We're filing a class action, and I'm opening a criminal investigation. As of today, I'm placing a hold on all HOA enforcement actions until this is resolved. The room erupted in applause. Friday morning, I served Priscilla with a copy of the petition and the formal motion for injunction. She answered the door in her pink robe, sunglasses perched on her head like she hadn't slept in days. She barely glanced at the papers. "You don't scare me, Elias." "Good," I said. "Because the truth should scare you more." I stepped back. "You're being investigated for fraud, unlawful surveillance, trespassing, and misuse of HOA funds. You'll also be summoned for a hearing by the County Oversight Committee." For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. Just shut the door slowly and disappeared inside. Later that afternoon, the sheriff's office received a subpoena for Priscilla's communication records. Between her emails, HOA minutes, and those shady payments, she was neck deep. The county prosecutor was already reviewing the evidence. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. But as I walked past my fishing shed and watched a couple of neighborhood kids cast plastic lures into the grass nearby, I figured I'd finally caught something bigger than base. Justice was biting. By Monday afternoon, the county fraud investigator assigned to the case asked me to meet him at the records building. His name was Marcus Patel, sharp as a scalpel and just as precise. He'd spent the weekend combing through the HOA's financials and flagged 3 years' worth of consulting contracts and questionable reimbursements. "I've got 6 checks signed by Priscilla and co-endorsed by someone named Lenora Hastings," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "That name ring a bell?" "She's the treasurer," I said. "Mostly silent at meetings, never speaks unless Priscilla cues her. Except she doesn't exist in the state payroll system, tax records, or DMV database under this ZIP code, and we checked voter rolls. No Lenora Hastings registered anywhere in the district." I thumbed through the checks. They were all neatly signed, same pen, same handwriting. Only one signature had a different slope barely. "Forgery, most likely," Marcus nodded. "We've got a handwriting analyst looking at it now." "If it's confirmed, that's check fraud, wire fraud if any HOA dues were paid online, and conspiracy to commit fraud if she fabricated a board member." I leaned back, absorbing it. That explains why no one's ever seen Lenora in person. Priscilla's been using a ghost name to double sign off on her own payouts. She may have created an entire fake identity to authorize illegal withdrawals. That's not just a civil suit anymore. What's the next step? I've requested a warrant to seize the HOA's central server. If she's been emailing under that alias, we'll find it. That night, I pulled out a copy of the HOA bylaws. Section 13 caught my eye, specifically the part about emergency board appointments. Apparently, if fewer than 3 board members remain after resignations or removals, the HOA must hold a special election within 15 days. That meant if Priscilla went down and Lenora was proven fake, there'd be no quorum. The board would dissolve until a vote could be held. I made some calls. 2 neighbors, both former military, agreed to run if it came to that. Honest folks who wanted their yards to stay their business. We needed 5 candidates total. By Wednesday morning, I had them, but the real spark came from the neighborhood's oldest resident, Mr. Clarence Dobbins. He'd lived there since the subdivision broke ground and kept meticulous records of everything: newsletters, notices, even meeting tapes on VHS. When I visited him, he pulled a weathered cardboard box from under his bed. "Thought you might want this," he said, handing me a stack of tapes labeled by year. "I stopped going to meetings a while back, got tired of being talked over." I took them to the tech lab at the department and had them digitized. One tape from 5 years ago showed a board vote approving a new landscaping contract. Priscilla had pushed it hard, claimed it would boost curb appeal and save money. But the company listed Greenstream Solutions was registered under a different name back then, a name I recognized. Decker Lawn and Irrigation. She'd renamed her ex-husband's dissolved business and filed it as a new vendor under an LLC. I called Thomas immediately. "That's procurement fraud," he said, his voice tight. "She padded the bids, funneled money through a shell company, and misrepresented vendor relationships. Did she declare any conflict of interest? Not once. Then we've got enough to file with the district attorney. I'll prep the affidavit." By Thursday, the DA's office had enough to issue subpoenas. At 9:00 a.m., 2 plainclothes investigators accompanied by a digital forensics expert entered the HOA office, a converted den in Priscilla's house, and walked out with 2 laptops, a desktop tower, and 4 boxes of paper files. I didn't see it happen. I was next door, meeting with a group of residents at Mrs. O'Malley's place to go over the next steps for the special election. But I heard the car doors slam and looked up just in time to see Priscilla step onto her porch in a navy blue pantsuit, arms crossed, jaw locked. One of the investigators handed her a pink slip of paper. She didn't argue, just stood there unmoving as they packed everything into the back of a black SUV and drove off. That night, the emergency board meeting was packed again. This time, Priscilla wasn't there. In her place, a young man named Owen, her nephew, apparently sat stiffly at the front table. He looked barely 20, palms sweating as he read a prepared statement. Due to unforeseen legal complications, Mrs. Decker has temporarily stepped down from her duties as HOA president. Per bylaw subsection 10, I've been appointed interim liaison until a formal vote can be arranged. I raised my hand. "Who appointed you?" Mrs. Decker left a signed memo designating me. "That's not how the bylaws work," Thomas interrupted, standing from the front row. "If a board member resigns or is removed under investigation, the remaining board must vote. If there are no legitimate board members left, the HOA is in administrative suspension. That means no one can enforce rules or collect dues until an election is held." Owen blinked. I was just told to read the statement." "You're not in trouble," I said. "But from this point forward, every action taken under her direction is null and void." A murmur spread through the crowd. Mrs. O'Malley stood up. "Then I motion we form an interim committee, submit our candidate list, and start the election process. Let's take our neighborhood back." The motion passed unanimously. By Saturday, I received confirmation from the DA's office. Priscilla had been formally charged with 5 counts of mail fraud, 3 counts of criminal impersonation, and multiple counts of theft by deception. Her bail hearing was scheduled for the following week. I didn't attend it. Instead, I was at the community cleanup day. We'd organized 50 neighbors in gloves and jeans, pulling weeds, repainting benches, and laughing like they hadn't in years. The tension that had blanketed the neighborhood for so long was gone, replaced by something none of us had felt in a while: ownership. By the next election, all 5 of our candidates were voted in unanimously. The new board dissolved the Decker-era enforcement policies, refunded all improperly collected fines, and opened the books to the entire neighborhood. Transparency wasn't just a checkbox anymore, it was policy. As for my fishing shed, still standing, still stocked. I even added a screened-in cleaning station behind it and hosted a fish fry for the whole block. Dale, the clipboard guy, showed up with his head low and a store-bought potato salad. I handed him a plate anyway. "You're not the enemy, Dale," I said. But next time someone tells you to do something shady, maybe ask why before you do it." He nodded, quiet. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the houses and kids chased fireflies across the street, I sat in my lawn chair with a cold drink in hand and watched my neighbors laugh like a weight had been lifted. Turns out, the biggest catch I ever made didn't come from the lake. It came from standing my ground on dry land. Clarence Dobbins rolled the last of the VHS tapes back into its sleeve and handed it to me as we stood on his porch under the late afternoon sun. "That's the last one I've got," he said. "Didn't know they'd end up being evidence." "They might have saved the whole neighborhood," I said, tucking the tape into a box already filled with labeled discs and printed transcripts. I wasn't collecting them out of nostalgia. The DA's office had requested full copies for a grand jury review. What started with fake fines and shell companies had grown into something much darker. 2 days earlier, Marcus Patel had called with an update. When the forensic team cracked one of the seized hard drives from Priscilla's home office, they found encrypted folders with names that didn't match any known vendors. Inside those folders were spreadsheets, hundreds of them, with personal data: addresses, bank routing numbers, HOA account balances, and in some cases, social security numbers. She hadn't just skimmed off the top. She'd been siphoning auto-pay information from residents who'd signed up through the HOA portal and routing small monthly maintenance fees to an offshore account registered under a fake nonprofit. It was identity theft on a scale the local legal system rarely saw. The district attorney immediately elevated the charges, and by the following morning, Priscilla was being held without bail. The courtroom was quiet when I showed up for the arraignment. Most of the neighborhood didn't know yet. Only those of us directly involved in the investigation had been briefed. I took a seat in the back row, behind Thomas and Marcus, who sat beside the assistant DA reviewing a thick binder of evidence. Priscilla walked in, flanked by 2 deputies. She looked smaller now. Not just physically, though jail uniforms had a way of stripping people down, but something in her posture had changed. She didn't scan the room, didn't toss out one-liners or try to intimidate. She stared straight ahead like the walls were the only thing still listening to her. When the judge read the charges, 27 counts of wire fraud, 10 counts of identity theft, and 1 count of racketeering under the state's organized crime statute, she didn't flinch. But when her lawyer leaned in and whispered something, she blinked fast, then slowly turned her head toward the gallery. She saw me. For a second, I thought she might stand up and shout something, but instead she looked away and said nothing. The judge denied bond. She'd tampered with digital evidence, attempted to redirect funds after the investigation began, and had access to financial systems that made her a flight risk. She was remanded until trial. Outside the courtroom, Thomas let out a breath. "They won't offer her a deal." "Not with the paper trail," Marcus nodded. "She stored everything, even the offshore transfer logs. She must have thought no one would ever look." "She thought she was untouchable," I said. "Not anymore." The trial was scheduled for the following month, but the damage cleanup was already underway. The new HOA board, now made up of 5 residents elected by a landslide, voted to suspend all ongoing contracts initiated by the previous administration. Every dollar spent by the HOA in the last 5 years was undergoing a third-party audit. And for the first time since the neighborhood was built, every homeowner received a full accounting of where their dues had gone. But the financial mess wasn't the only thing left behind. One afternoon, I got a call from Cindy Morales, a nurse who lived 4 houses down. She'd just received a collections notice from a firm she'd never heard of, claiming she owed a past HOA fine for unauthorized garden lighting, a violation she'd never been cited for. She forwarded the notice. I traced it back to a fake collections agency that had been dissolved 2 years earlier. The address listed was a storage unit under Priscilla's name. When investigators opened it, they found boxes of unshredded documents, some with residents' banking information, others with digital signature templates and templates for violation notices. The unit also contained dozens of blank HOA stationery sheets with pre-stamped approval seals. She hadn't just abused her position. She'd built a private operation using the HOA as a front, a one-woman scam machine. The DA's office added 5 more charges: mail fraud, data trafficking, and forgery. At the next community town hall, I stood up and gave everyone the update. I only shared what the DA had cleared for release, but it was enough to make the room silent. We were all targeted, I said. Not just with fees or rules. Our privacy, our trust, it was weaponized, but now we have the chance to rebuild better. Mrs. O'Malley stood and asked the question on everyone's mind. How do we make sure this never happens again? The new board president, a retired engineer named Franklin Cho, took the mic. We're introducing a transparency initiative. All financial decisions over $500 will require a public vote. No more backroom deals. And we're investing in cybersecurity, no more insecure portals. Most importantly, we're rechartering the HOA. Every resident gets a say in what the new bylaws look like. The room erupted in applause. I didn't stay long after. I walked home under the glow of porch lights and cicadas, thinking about how fast things had changed. My fishing shed, which had sparked this whole mess, now stood as a kind of monument to personal boundaries. Still locked, still stocked. No one questioned it anymore. A week before the trial, I received a subpoena to testify. I wasn't surprised. I'd been part of the entire chain of discovery. At the courthouse, I walked past rows of reporters, some local, a few national, all looking for a soundbite about the HOA queenpin, as one newspaper had dubbed her. Inside, the prosecution laid out their case in full: forged board members, stolen identities, rerouted payments, and manipulated violations. Residents testified one after another, not just about the money, but about the fear. The way they'd tiptoe around their own yards. The way they'd stopped hosting barbecues or flying flags or even planting flowers. It wasn't just theft. It was control. When I took the stand, the prosecutor asked only one question. Deputy Carter, in your professional opinion, would you consider the actions of the defendant to be consistent with a deliberate and coordinated operation designed to exploit her position for personal financial gain? I nodded. Yes. Without a doubt. The defense tried to paint her as overwhelmed, misguided, even manipulated herself, but the evidence was too clear, the trail too clean. She'd orchestrated every piece of it. The jury deliberated less than an hour, guilty on all 38 counts. Sentencing was swift. 20 years with no chance of parole for the first 13. She was escorted out of the courtroom in handcuffs, eyes fixed on the floor. No one clapped, no one cheered. It wasn't that kind of victory, but it was justice. Back in the neighborhood, the election signs had disappeared. Lawns returned to their regular imperfections. People waved again. Kids rode their bikes past my driveway without their parents rushing to call them back. The air felt lighter. One evening, I sat out by the shed with Clarence and Franklin. We didn't talk about the trial. We didn't have to. Instead, we talked about finally putting in that community garden behind the park benches. About letting residents vote on paint colors instead of mandating them. About what it meant to live somewhere you actually wanted to come home to. Clarence raised his glass and said, "To small sheds and big reckonings." I laughed. "And to never underestimating a clipboard." Franklin grinned. "Or a deputy with a fishing rod." As the sun dipped below the rooftops and the cicadas started their chorus, I leaned back in my chair and let the silence stretch. Not the tense kind that came with watching your back, but the kind that came when you knew finally that you were safe in your own yard. And that no one, not even a self-declared queen of the HOA, could take that away again.